Hey, this is Gary.
This is Mike.
And Daniel. We're not professionals. We're just three addicts sharing our experiences, strength, and hope regarding recovery.
Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other addicts and to practice these principles in our lives.
Welcome to another episode of the 12th Step Podcast. This is Daniel.
This is Mike.
And this is Gary.
And on this episode, we're going to be talking about focus, especially with our recovery. This last couple weeks, I've been noticing a trend that was happening before my divorce, and it's happened since my divorce. And I've just kind of been taking a deeper dive as I've been working through my step work and realizing, for me, my focus, it's gotten better, but a lot of my focus is on the things that I didn't have or that I had lost. And realizing that was constantly dragging me down. It was not taking me in a direction that was positive. I would reminisce. I lost my marriage. I lost, the relationship with some of my kids. I didn't have the house that I used to have, and all these negative things. Instead of focusing on what I did have.
Sure.
Despite how difficult my divorce was, I still had my recovery. I still do. Not only that, I was able to get a house. Yes, it's not the same size as my previous home, but it's mine. It's my house. I have a roof over my head. I'm warm during the winter. I have food in my refrigerator, and it's a place my kids can come to, and it's not transitory. It's not like I'm going to be moving to a new apartment. Not only that, I do have a relationship with some of my kids, and I have friends and family that know my story, and they're there for me. So these are all positive things, and I realized as I shifted looking at the positive that I didn't feel as weighed down. I didn't feel as depressed or ucky. That's probably not even a word, ucky.
Not in the English language.
Yeah, icky. There was this kind of this. It's like I was Eeyore and just had this perpetual cloud floating over my head, even though things were actually still going really well. And it's because I gave it a negative meaning. Because those things weren't in my life, I must have been a failure.
Sure.
I wasn't successful. It played with my self-worth. And so I'm sure other addicts out there are dealing with that as well, where instead of focusing on the positives and the things they have, they're focusing on those negatives. And then they're giving them an even more negative meaning, which is dragging them further down. And who knows, maybe they're relapsing as well.
There's a lot to unpack here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot to unpack here. So that's a great topic, and thanks for bringing that up. I a couple of things as you were talking that sort of jumped off the page that I was thinking of. First and foremost, I believe that everyone who starts down the path of recovery probably starts from a fairly narrow perspective, and that is that my life sucks. I've got this problem that's going on in my life that I can't seem to get my arms around. I can't control it. It's bigger than me, and I'm feeling shame and guilt, and I'm about to lose everything that's really important to me, which may include job, spouse, kids, a house, all those things, because there's so much loss that's associated with this. And so I think it's a very natural tendency for, at least my experience with anybody I've ever started a group with, that's a very common feeling and response.
Yeah, and fear, yeah.
Yeah. And that they come into this thing with a whole lot of trepidation. I will honestly tell you that when I started my very first stage 1 experience, I didn't feel like I was going to be successful in this. Mm-hmm. I didn't see this as being, and in fact, I remember, Gary, that you were not there the first week that I had been there, and remember that I had missed the very first week. So we're 3 weeks into it before I met you, and I was looking around the room thinking to myself, there's no one in this room that gets me, that totally understands me. And it's a very lonely place. There were 8 or 10 of us in there. People had some very difficult circumstance that they were dealing with as well. And why I chose to minimize them, I have no idea. But that feeling, even in the process of recovery, feeling like I'm not going to be successful in this. I don't know how I can be successful because there's really no one here that understands me. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't quite certain that I was as problematic as my counselor had indicated that I was. So there was some of that hang up as well. Like, look, maybe I'm not as bad as he thinks I am. Of course, we all know how that came out because he revealed to me just how bad I was and how sick I was. So all of that stuff creates this, what you would consider to be a negative perspective, and I think that's true. I think each one of us start with that. And it's only until we can start working our recovery and finding some success in that recovery that I think we switch from the negative to positive.
Well, and I think for me, the reason this has come up is because, again, I'm digging up things and looking at things, because it used to be that narrow perspective. Oh man, I'm just garbage. I'm crap. Nothing I do is right. And now it's like, okay, that's not true. I just had this negative focus. And what would things have been had, during this horrible time in my marriage where, my ex was mad at me because of my acting out, and it just went even worse because I was doing things in, reaction of how she was acting, that if I would have been less worried about the things that I didn't have, like less worried about the fact I was sleeping on the couch, less worried about the fact we weren't going on dates, and more focused on, well, she's still here. Even though I'm sleeping on the couch, I'm still in the house.
Sure.
And more on the things I did have, would things have turned out differently. And it's not because, I'm living in that place. It's like just realizing that if I would have had a different perspective look on things, that maybe something could have changed. But more importantly, I would have had a better outlook in moving forward, and maybe my recovery wouldn't have been as difficult, and I wouldn't have had to hit rock bottom as hard as I did, or done some of the things I did, because I would have had a different perspective.
Well, you could also argue that if you had a different perspective, you might not have gotten yourself into your addiction.
I mean, that's true. That is true.
No, because I've been listening, and I've been thinking about the topic, and I'm really, really big on saying that, doesn't matter where you are in your life or what's going on, you always have more to be grateful for than you do to feel sorry for yourself about.
Right.
Okay. So I was thinking about, the lowest points of my life, and I stand by what I said. That's true. Now, at the time, I completely lacked the ability to see that or to appreciate it in any kind of meaningful way.
Sure.
So you're absolutely right, Mike. We all start with all of these thinking errors in place, and that's what our focus is on. And
It's probably because there's so much at stake.
There
At
is,
that point
yeah.
in time,
Sure.
these are some tough decisions.
Yeah.
There's lots
and
at
do you know
stake.
what? Quite honestly, we might not be bringing the best tools to the table. We might not have any. Well, I can't say any, but you might.
Sure.
Some of our tools may be broken, bent, taped back together.
Used for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's
Using
interesting.
a screwdriver as a hammer.
Yeah. But it's interesting that we're talking a little bit about focus, because very much we're creatures of focus. We need to have something that we focus on. Our psychology is all set up that way, even physically, with our eyes pointed forward. We're all set up to have something that we focus for. Even our language kind of denotes that kind of a thing. And I think we have a tendency to make real in our lives what we focus on. So if you focus on the negative things all the time, you're going to create a mire for which you can wallow in. If you're focusing on improvement or this high ideal, you're going to inevitably draw closer to that.
Sure.
So, yeah, I just remember something I wrote down because I was reading something. It says, the brain simply believes what you tell it most.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're constantly telling it these negative things, or I don't have this, I don't have that, then it's going to believe that. And it's not going to be grateful. It's not going to look for that positive thing. It's like, well, I'm grateful that my wife is still here. I'm grateful that I have my recovery today. I am grateful that I have a relationship with my kids.
I'm gonna interject here.
Sure.
I think you have to be at a certain place in your recovery path
That is
to have
true.
a conversation
Yes.
about gratitude.
Yes.
I remember, I can tell you that very early on, I remember our common counselor making a comment to the effect that there's going to be a day when you're grateful for this disease.
Yeah.
And you could have tipped me over with a feather. I thought, what on earth has he been
Yeah, I remember that
smoking?
day.
Because there is no way that me or anyone in my life is going to say, yeah, this is something that I'm really grateful for. And yet, oddly enough, I'm here today saying, and I it feels like I'm throwing up in my mouth to say that he's right on something, but I'm going to say that he's actually, that he's right, spot on. That there is this thought now as I go through this, thinking to myself, there's no possible way I could be where I'm at today without this addiction. It's been difficult. It's been a hard path, but wow, I'm really grateful for it, and I'm grateful for the people that it's introduced me to, and I'm grateful for the people that have supported me. So, but I don't believe that you're at that place the minute you walk in.
No, you're not.
Starting
No,
down this
definitely
path.
not. No, I mean, here I am, almost 4 years in, at least doing this program,
Sure.
and that, this is just now something that I'm now realizing, like, oh wow, I really failed at that in my marriage.
Right.
I really failed at that while I was in my addiction.
Sure.
And now that I've gotten a substantial amount of recovery, I'm realizing, wow, I need to really focus and pay attention to not getting back into that mindset,
Right.
and be appreciative of the things I have right now.
I think there's also a component here that I think we're overlooking, and I steps 2 and 3 have an awful lot to do with understanding and recognizing and identifying this higher power.
Yes.
And then this overwhelming urge to just get rid of all these things, just simply turn everything over and say, look, I can't do it anymore. I'm giving everything to my higher power, and I need that in my life. And to be honest with you, the very transition that you're talking about of moving from a negative perspective to a positive perspective, at least from where I'm sitting today, requires some relationship with that higher power in order to be able to do that. Because it's that point in time when you start to recognize it's not the recognition of something that's missing in your life, it's the recognition and the being grateful and gratitude for something that is in your life. And that's a perspective that only a higher power can provide. That's not something you just wake up one morning being negative Nelly yesterday and positive Ed today.
No.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of this boils down because of my step 6 work, where it's like, okay, what are my character defects? And one of those was that.
Sure.
I was focused on the negative. So now I want to focus on the positive, the things that I do have in my life. So, and it takes work. It definitely does. And even then, I know it's not going to be, hey, tomorrow I'm just never going to think negatively. I'm going to probably have a bad day in a week or two. And I'm going to be like, oh, man, I'm doing it again. I need to get back over here.
Right.
Because, I mean, definitely that's the one thing recovery has taught me. I'm not going to be perfect at this, and I can't be. I'm going to slip. I'm going to have some mistakes in my thought process and the way I see things.
You want to hear something that I thought was pretty cool?
Sure.
Because you're kind of talking about it. So, okay, bear with me for just a minute.
Alrighty.
Okay, I'm going to use some religious terminology
Sweet.
because it actually kind of fits pretty cool right here. Okay, so ideally what we're supposed to do with our lives is we aim for the highest possible ideal that we can. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So that's our focus. This is what I want to be. I want to be sober. I want to be, whatever.
Right.
So this is my focus. This is my higher power. This is what I'm striving for. Okay. Now, so did you guys know that sin, the etymology of that word is actually an archery term that means to miss the mark?
I did not know
I
that.
did not know that, actually.
It means to miss the mark. And then repentance, the term repentance is actually to rethink or turn.
I did know that.
Okay. So the idea of what it's trying to teach you, what those words are actually trying to imply is you have your focus, the target that you want to be, and you take your shot.
And you missed the mark.
If you miss the mark, then it's a sin. But the solution to that is to turn, essentially aim anew, and shoot again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the beautiful thing about it is that it's not so much that you're punished or condemned for missing the mark. The point is to keep shooting at the target. Okay?
Right.
And you want to practice that so much that you don't practice until you hit the target. You practice until you don't miss.
Mm-hmm.
That's a notable difference.
That is a notable difference, right? But the process is important. Okay? And the beautiful thing about it with recovery is that you have the latitude. That's one of the things that I love so much about the next right thing. You could easily switch that to take your next shot, right? Take the next shot, give it another go. And I, where you had just started kind of bringing that up, that you do your best until you know better, then you do better. You can think of the process that way too. What am I focusing on? I'm focusing on this highest ideal, right? And then if you're focusing on something that's not ideal, all of those mechanics are still in your system. If you focus on something low, you're going to keep shooting at it until you hit it.
Sure.
And then you'll do it so much that you don't miss, and then you're addicted. And and then you got a lot of work to do.
Right.
But you see, I've really found that really
Very
kind
true.
of fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I'm actually going to use the 3 circles, which is a tool of, which is as you were speaking, I wanted to think about the 3 circles for just a minute, which is and I know we've shared this in a podcast and a variety of different things, but the irony of the 3 circles when we first start out through this process is to not find ourselves in the middle circle.
Yeah.
Right? And there's so much effort as we think of ourselves that perhaps today is a great day, so I'm living in the outer circle, and something happened today that tripped me up that sent me into the middle circle. But the overall arching goal of the 3 circles is to not find ourselves in that inner circle, right? That's the place where we've decided is, oh my word, that's Neverland. That's where we're going to go. And that's the sort of stuff that we actually have a relapse. That's the stuff we don't want to do, is the middle circle. That's an actual relapse, and we don't want to do that. An interesting thing happens as we move down this path of recovery, that we're focused on that negative side of things, of not finding ourselves in that inner circle. We just don't want to find ourselves there at all. And then somewhere there's this magical switch. Oh my word, my life is so much better that when I'm in the outer circle, that's where I want to be. So it's instead of worrying so much about finding ourselves, when we find ourselves in the middle circle, saying, oh no, we might slip and slide and find ourselves in the inner circle, that suddenly that's like, no, I'm not worried about the inner circle so much. What I'm really worried about is getting back to the outer circle, because my life is better and it's complete in that spot. And I think that's where we move from this negative positive thing that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tool. And that's a very natural process for people to go through when they experience that.
Well, and with the three circle method, in the very beginning, you kind of see that as a funnel.
Exactly.
Like if you're on the outside, you're okay, but once you step in the middle circle, it's a slide down.
It's a slippery slope, and here I go.
As you get going, you realize, no, it's kind of a flat plane. You kind of wander in there and you're like, oh, hey, I kind of crossed that boundary.
I don't want to be here.
I don't want to be here. I'm just gonna go walk back onto the other side.
Yeah.
It's not this death-defying slide towards the middle.
Right.
Do you know what I like about that model?
What?
Is that the inner circle
Is teeny.
is tiny, and the middle circle is a little bit bigger, but that outer circle can go
Forever.
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me something else. Sorry, I was leaning away from the mic. Something that Mike actually does quite a bit. So if you've ever noticed that Mike is hard to hear, it's because he's leaning back in his chair.
Thank you to one of our listeners who called that out.
I thought we weren't going to talk about that.
We weren't, but I just did it, and I didn't want to be the only one.
The irony, it's that was leaning back.
All right. Do you guys remember in the first Toy Story?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At the climax of the movie, Buzz and Woody are shot up into the air by the rocket.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And they cut themselves loose and they open the wings, and they come down, and the moving van is right here, and then ahead of that is the car.
That's right.
Okay.
And Woody makes the comment,
You missed the truck.
Yeah, you missed the truck.
And then Buzz says, we're not
not
aiming
aiming for
the truck.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So
great line.
Great line. Remember, guys, we're not aiming for the truck.
Yeah.
Okay. You're aiming for that outer circle. You're aiming for that highest ideal. And you know what? You get to another shot.
Yep.
You know what? You're not done until you choose not to shoot anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Keep shooting. Do that next right thing.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah.
And once you get to that and you're really good, there may be a higher thing
Of
that you
course
can start
there will
shooting
be.
for.
Yeah. The other thing I want to... We talk about these things as though they're static, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm having a negative experience here, and suddenly my perspective is now positive. I think the reality of it is these things are not static at all.
Correct.
That they're moving all the time. And so you may run yourself into spaces of negative and positive all the way along through the path of recovery. And that's only because the target at which you're shooting at moves, right? I mean, I've arrived at this particular place. Here's the next objective.
Yeah.
I've arrived at this place. Here's the next objective. And I think that's just how it goes. And we have to be okay with that. That's really the process of discovery. That's really the process of curiosity. All those words that we use in recovery that are healthy. I've had lots of people ask me, Mike, when do you intend to be done with all of this? And my answer to that is never.
Yeah.
I don't ever see myself not going to a counselor. I don't ever see myself not. And the reason for that is because I absolutely love the discovery of it all. Now, I will tell you, I was terrified on day one, but I don't feel that fear anymore.
Right. And something else that I've experienced that I know you've experienced, and I pointed out several times, is you have to open yourself up to what's going to come.
Right.
You don't get to control that. You have to take life on life's terms. But if you open yourself up to the possibilities in that outer circle living, you might find yourself starting a 12-step group in your area. You might find yourself doing a podcast. Well, I mean, every one of us at this table is doing something right now that in the beginning of our recovery didn't even occur to us that we would do.
Exactly.
I never once imagined myself doing a podcast, let alone one on recovery.
Absolutely.
But here we are.
Yeah.
And this is very rewarding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we're in our addiction, we're much like a hermit crab. We've got our little world, and we just tuck into it. We have our walls and everything. We don't want to expand out of that. And as we grow, we got to leave that shell. And even hermit crabs will leave to go to a bigger one.
Got to find a bigger house.
Yeah, but it did. Hopefully, if you're doing recovery right, you don't need the shell. You can wander out, and improve and aim for the next. The car, not the truck.
No.
And I mean, the great thing is, as far as I've seen, as long as I'm continuing to learn and evaluate myself and see those things that were character flaws or things that I was doing, and I want to change those, I'm solid. I'm doing well, because once I stop, I'm like, I've arrived. I know I'm in trouble.
Yeah, that's a negative place to be.
Yeah,
not a good place.
I'll take the last couple minutes and
go ahead.
Kind of share a quick story. So, my father is 76 years old. Okay. When his father, my grandfather, was 76 years old, he died of a massive heart attack. Okay.
Wow.
Now, this becomes more relevant if you know that today my father had open heart surgery and had a quadruple bypass. Now,
and yet you're still here doing a podcast.
I'm still here doing a podcast. Well, I spent all day up at the hospital, and now my siblings are up there, and everything has went perfectly well. But this is the idea of focus that I just want to share, because I was just thinking about it. Okay, within my father's lifetime, the operation that is prolonging his life wasn't possible for my grandfather.
That's a true story.
Okay. So I go up to the hospital. I have my siblings around me, and I had this conversation with my dad as he was preparing himself to go into this. And I pointed out to him, I said, yeah, absolutely, it's going to be painful. And yes, it's going to be scary. Usually anytime you aim for something that is higher or is good for you, it's going to be hard, and it's going to be scary, and it's going to be difficult.
Right.
I said, there is nothing but things to be grateful for in this situation. You're in a situation where you can have this surgery, that the chances are that it's going to be very, very successful.
Yeah.
You caught this massive problem before you had a heart attack, so there's no damage to your heart.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
And so I began to, and I said, and you live close enough to a facility that can do this, and they have staff that's well trained. And I'm just listening. Yes, it's scary, but we're here to support you. All of your kids are close. We're going to take it in turns to go sit with mom, and we're going to see you when you're done. And, we've made all of these plans and things like that. But guys, I found some of my siblings focusing on just the scary pieces and the worry, which, to be fair, it's scary.
Yeah.
Okay. But in this situation, there is so much to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, when I was growing up and I would go to Sunday school, and they would talk about how that there would be miracles and things like that. I often thought that meant you'd have a couple guys dressed up like the apostles in robes walking down the street, healing the blind and doing all this kind of stuff. So I never realized that I would live in a time. I knew that there would be miracles. My faith told me that there would be miracles. I never realized that we would live in a time that miracles were ordinary.
Right.
That they were so common that, and they were. Everything about today was a miracle for me. My recovery is a miracle.
Right.
My recovery from my car accident was a miracle. The perspective I have on that is a miracle.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all because I think more now than ever in my life, I have a good focus.
Right.
And I get to the point more and more every day where that's almost all I see. I take life on life's terms, and life throws me big challenges.
Right.
And I am aware that there is tragedy in my life. I'm aware that I will suffer loss as people, as eventually, I'll lose people, or they'll lose me. But I'm better equipped ever than to handle this stuff, and it's because of where my focus is at.
Yeah.
And that's so much to be grateful for.
Absolute truth.
So I don't know how much that really applied to what we're talking about, but if your focus is correct, even the things that are challenging in life, you'll find reasons to be grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even look back 50 years. The equipment just to do what we're doing right now took up a room, and you had to go to a facility to be able to record something. And, this topic probably wouldn't even be talked about or be approved to be on the air because, but we can do this.
Or even understood.
Yeah, I mean, and we have this tiniest of device that's recording all this for us. We have microphones in front of us, and we can sit in the comfort of your house in a single room and do this.
I like to refer to it as the room of wonders.
Yes. And, this is even a miracle to some of our listeners. They're hearing things that help them in moments of crisis, in moments of difficulty.
And not just down the street,
Yeah.
all around the world.
Yeah. And so
It's remarkable.
sometimes, again, it's just kind of a focus, For me, I remember growing up that, miracles were what you saw Moses do on the Ten Commandments every time at Easter when I watched that, frogs coming out of the Nile turning red, meteorites coming down. But no, it's just simple, small things. It doesn't have to be gigantic, grand gestures. It just was that way to make a point for a certain group of people.
It's always the small things, I think.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
So,
I think you're right. What a great topic.
yes. Okay.
I appreciated the discussion. That was, I think it's a relevant discussion. I think we have a lot of listeners who experience that, the negative view of things, as difficult as this is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
And realize that life comes on life's terms. You're going to have good days and bad days. That doesn't, if you're having a rough day or a bad day, that doesn't mean you've lost it. It just means you're having a rough day.
Get through it.
And get through it. The next day is a brand new day. You can refocus.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, with that said, this is Daniel saying, find the humility in your recovery.
This is Mike saying, do the work necessary to find the peace that recovery brings.
And this is Gary reminding all of you that we're not aiming for the truck. Do the next right thing.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
As a fellowship of recovering addicts, Sex Addicts Anonymous offers a message of hope to anyone who suffers from sex addiction. Check out saa-recovery.org.